Welcome to our already 12th investor conference. Very happy to see you in Kiev. In my opening remarks, I'll touch upon three subjects. The first one is the program of our conference. Second is I'll try to summarize the major achievements the country has achieved over the past 2 years, as well as the challenges that remain to be addressed. And I'll update you on what Dragon has done over the last year, on what we are up to, how we look at the investment landscape, and what we think makes sense to do these days in Ukraine. As to our program, it is very comprehensive. As you have been able to see, we have all the branches of power represented here throughout the day. We have the Verkhovna Rada represented by the speaker, Mr. Groisman. We have the presidential administration represented here on the subsequent panels, and we have also the key ministries through their ministers represented here. Besides that, we have also the central bank, the Securities and Exchange Commission, CEO of the largest Ukrainian state-owned company, Naftogaz, all of the major international creditors like IMF, US, EU, EBRD, and others. And last but not least, our last panel in the afternoon is dedicated to civic society and to the anti-corruption fight, which remains a priority for Ukraine these days. And the civic society, you will be able to see, is one of the driving forces of the changes currently going on in Ukraine. The panel will be launched by Mr. Saakashvili, who, according to some of the most recent polls, is one of the most popular politicians in Ukraine. By the way, we have also the top 3 candidates for the post of the Prime Minister represented here today on various panels that have been mentioned quite widely in the media recently. That's Mr. Groisman himself, Natalie Yaresko, the Minister of Finance, and the Governor of Odessa, Mr. Saakashvili. So we will have a little beauty parade here. No official voting like 2 years ago when you were asked one month ahead of the presidential election to choose between a male, female, and president, which you actually selected very correctly. So we will not do this this time. As to the major achievements that the country has achieved, that we need to give credit to the new politicians. First of all, it's the banking sector reform. It's not finished yet. You will hear more from the governor of the central bank in the afternoon. But there's been very substantial progress made on closing inviable banks, transparency of ownership in the banking sector, and related party lending. Secondly, it's the energy sector reform, and here Mr. Kobolev on the second panel will also provide you with more detail. That's price liberalization, diversified gas imports, and more competition in the sector. Thirdly, it's fiscal policy. There's been quite substantial consolidation, very conservative fiscal policy with last year's deficit of just over 2% of GDP, which is a great achievement. There has been also the first stage of tax reform has been launched, which moved Ukraine in terms of tax competitiveness from the bottom quarter into the top quarter among economies in our region. And it's been also increased transparency in the budget process. Fourthly, it's the public procurement reform, which was launched by the Ministry of Economy and which will extend throughout this year to the whole public procurement process in the country, and which may save up to 3% of GDP in terms of budget spending. Fifth, some of the most successful and visible reforms is the reform of the patrol police, which serves as an example how the new institutions should be created from scratch and how they are able to gain public support and trust. The new patrol police, which was launched first in Kiev in the spring of last year and now in all major Ukrainian cities, is a great example how to reform the civil service overall and make it transparent and not corrupt, unlike the old system. And sixth and last is the anti-corruption effort. It's by no means finished, but the Verkhovna Rada has made great progress in terms of approving a large set of anti-corruption laws over the last year and a half, and new institutions to fight corruption have been put in place and have started working at the end of last year, and we will hear about some of their first successes a little bit later. The most visible of them is the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, which started working and is also a completely new institution. The 6 priorities that we see that need to be tackled by the Verkhovna Rada and by the government is, first of all, it's further progress on the anti-corruption effort. The things that I mentioned above are just a start. Corruption remains still one of the largest problems. Secondly, it's the improvements in rule of law, that's judiciary and law enforcement reform, and I'm glad that we have just on the way here discussed it with Mr. Groisman, and he remains also a great supporter of the judiciary and law enforcement reform and believes that this process can be launched relatively quickly if there is sufficient political will. Thirdly, it's the civil service that needs to be transformed. The civil service is still occupied, unlike the new institutions that I mentioned, like the patrol police, by lowly motivated and lowly paid employees. That needs to be changed. There has been a law to this effect approved by the parliament, but it remains to be implemented. Fourth is state-owned enterprises. That also remains a large source of corruption. So most of them need to be privatized, and the ones that will remain in state ownership need to be, their corporate governance needs to be reformed, and they have to become more transparent. We'll also hear about it a little bit later. Fifth, social security, healthcare, and education need to be also reformed. They remain very inefficient and corrupt. And sixth, we are great supporters of the agricultural land liberalization. This can be by far the biggest source of FDI for the next not few years, but for the next 10, 20 years. And if the Verkhovna Rada does not extend the moratorium this year any further, and it will become possible to privatize agricultural land from next year, this would be a great boost to the growth of the Ukraine economy. As for Dragon, we are very, very happy to continue to be the #1 local house, providing you with research, liquidity, and advice on what to do in our market. Last year, our fixed income business has been very busy. It's been a very volatile year, but in the end, the Ukraine Eurobonds ended up to be the best performing in the world. In equities, equities remain to be laggards, and unfortunately, that will probably remain the case for the next couple of years. The market is very liquid, but we nevertheless see some mid to long-term future, and have decided ourselves to continue investing in the market infrastructure, bought out the Moscow Stock Exchange from the Ukraine Stock Exchange to allow this institution to develop, and hope to attract some international as well as further local partners into the development of the local market infrastructure. You may know that we have also been doing, since the foundation of Dragon in 2000, direct private equity investments, and I'll just tell you how our thinking has been developing over the last 3 years. We have been quite negative throughout 2013, as the country seemed to be moving kind of onto the Belarusian path and didn't have much appetite to make any investments. We got very excited at the end of the last revolution in in February 2014, and unfroze quite a lot of our investment plans. Unfortunately, that optimism was relatively short-lived and was stopped by the Russian military aggression in the east, and we have put most of our new investments on hold until the military and economic situation would become easier to understand for us. So we have, in that period of 2014, early 2015, we have invested just into the country infrastructure. We thought with my partners that it would be wise to support independent media, and invested in 2014 into a group of independent journalists, and launched a site and weekly news magazine called Novoje Vremya, just to increase the share of non-oligarchic controlled media. But this is less of a business project, more of a civic social project. We have also understood in December 2014 and January 2015, when the new government came into power, and there were quite a few technocrats attracted, not the majority, but at least a quarter of the new ministers in the last government have been technocratic, and also the newly elected parliament attracted quite a lot of people from outside politics. We understood that these people need some outside. There was a great demand for some outside support. So we have consulted with Ivan Miklos, whom you will hear from later, the former Minister of Finance of Slovakia and Deputy Prime Minister, how to do this. And we have decided together with him and with Sviatoslava Karchuk to found an economic think tank called Center for Economic Strategy to provide, it's an independent think tank that supports reforms that leads to economic growth and European integration of Ukraine. As to real business investing, we have come to the conclusion only in April 2015 that the worst is over in both military as well as economic terms. And our private equity fund that we launched in 2010 with EBRD has made its last investment and acquired majority stake in one of the largest security service companies. So far we have been proven right that the bottom has been achieved in the second quarter of 2015, both economically. We have seen the economy growing in the last 2 quarters of 2015, and thanks God, the military conflict seems to be also, or in terms of the worst, seems to be behind us, and I hope that will stay like that. And at the end of last year, we have launched together with Soros Fund Management a new Ukraine fund. It's a private equity fund that hopes to deploy most of its capital in this and next year, while the competition in the market remains to be quite low. And it seems to be a similar situation to the early 2000s when we have originated some of our best private equity investments over the last 15, 16 years. So by that I just wanted to illustrate that we are not just talking, but we put our money where our mouth is, and feel cautiously optimistic for various reasons that the country is on the right path. On that note, I'll introduce Mr. Groisman. Mr. Groisman has served as Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, since November 2014. He was elected to Parliament on the ticket of President Petro Poroshenko's party, moving to legislative office from government, where he came right after the Euromaidan revolution in February 2014 to serve as Deputy Prime Minister for Regional Development. 8 years prior to that, at an early age of 28, he was elected mayor of Vinica, becoming the youngest mayor of one of the regional centers in Ukraine. And in 2010, he was re-elected with a record high support rate of 78% of votes of the people of Vinica. And during his municipal tenure, Vinica has become one of the most reformed and open for investor cities. We keep hearing that, discussing with different businesses, that the city remains very open for business, and it's also one of the cities that shows demographic growth and attracts people and businesses. So we would like to hear also how this experience can be replicated on the nationwide level.